You're listening to The Blockchain Show. This episode of The Blockchain Show is brought to you by AXEL, IPFS. AXEL is returning trust to the internet by returning control of data to the user. For more information about AXEL, visit www.axel.network/IPFS. The Blockchain Show is a podcast that demystifies cryptocurrencies and distributed ledger technology.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Blockchain Show. This is episode 137. Today, we have a special guest, Dave Kaplan, the AXEL General Counsel. Dave, welcome to the show.
And thanks a lot for having me on. Pleased to be here.
Yeah, it's great talking with you. Appreciate your time. We have been following AXEL quite a bit the last month. But I guess before we really dive into AXEL, would you mind briefly introducing yourself and talk a little bit about your role at AXEL?
Sure. So as you mentioned, my name is Dave Kaplan, and I am the General Counsel at AXEL. So that means I'm an attorney. Not always everyone's favorite person, but my background is that I'm originally an engineer. I was an aerospace engineer in college, actually, and then I went on to law school, where I focused on the intellectual property and patent areas, and that's what I ended up practicing in when I got out of school. And I'm from the New York area, so I was at a New York law firm for about 10 years. And then I moved out to Las Vegas, and I was at a small footwear company, actually, for a couple of years, serving as their general counsel. And now I'm here at AXEL. So, my career basically, I had, again, more of a litigation and intellectual property and patent focus at first. And then I kind of started getting general counsel experience. And now, this was kind of a great fit for me at AXEL. And I've been here for a year and a half because I was finally able to combine the tech world, which is, fits well into my engineering and IP background, with my, in-house attorney experience.
Yeah, that's really great. We've been trying to get an attorney on the show for a while, and you're the first. So this is a new thing for us. And I would imagine there's not too terribly many attorneys focusing on blockchain. Maybe we just don't know about it. I'm kind of curious, what exactly would your role kind of look like at AXEL? What have you been involved with lately?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting that you actually mentioned that there's not a lot of attorneys in this area, because one of the first things I learned when I got to AXEL, I didn't have a lot of blockchain experience myself, but I learned that there are not many attorneys that do it. I mean, and this would have been in 2018, so the market was really hot at the time, and it was hard to even get attorneys that practiced in the area when I was, we were looking to consult with outside counsel, and it was hard to even get people to talk to me on the phone sometimes. So, I think, on both ends of the spectrum, first of all, a lot of, blockchain projects don't have their own in-house counsel. And then, even for outside counsel, there wasn't that many people in the area. And, when you think about it, that's not too surprising, I guess, because it is a new area of law. So it's certainly evolving a lot, but it's not something where people have been practicing for 2 decades like you find in a lot of other areas. So I guess just to connect that with my experience here, which is basically it's been a huge learning experience. I think the lawyers in this area are all learning things together. So I kind of started with a blank slate, and, I've been going through the learning process, but then, a lot of my work here is just dealing with the day-to-day, functions that any corporation has, employment, issues, and, just various other, a lot of actually what I do deals with promotion, what can and can't be said, from a promotional level, and just reviewing those kind of things, and just making sure that all the proper procedures are in place and followed. But lately things have actually been very, very interesting for us, and especially for me. You probably heard that since you've been following us, about our IEO.
Yeah. How's that going?
Yeah, so I mean, we ended up partnering with a Korean company called Probit, and they did in conjunction with us. We worked together with them to do an IEO, and we hit more than our minimum targets. So we were pleased with the way it went, and it was, again, like a lot of other things, it was a learning experience for us. But yeah, we're pleased to, we're planning on listing on their exchange once we figure out the appropriate date for that, which we'll be announcing, in the next short while. But it's been a great experience from a legal standpoint. That was another aspect of my practice here, which is dealing with international contracts and other things, as you might imagine. A lot of the blockchain space it basically transcends country borders. So you're dealing with a lot of different laws and regulatory agencies, and that's a whole nother aspect of practice.
Right. Yeah. A lot of people. I mean, it's still such a new and evolving space. It must be interesting from your legal point of view, just how all this connects. Sometimes we joke around and wonder if we're still in the Wild West days of blockchain. So that's good to hear that the IEO is going well, and the new network. We're definitely going to be. I think we're going to have a few more people from AXEL on in the next couple of weeks. So we're gonna keep this momentum rolling. So I know that data privacy is a big part of AXEL's mission. I didn't get to talk with Jeremy about this a couple of weeks ago, but there was a Capital One credit card security breach that I actually got alerted about because I have a Capital One. Something like millions of people's data was stolen. I haven't even opened that email because it's too depressing. But I wondered if you knew anything about the recent Capital One issue happening now.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we follow very closely here at AXEL. I know from talking with Jeremy and reading our materials that data custody is one of the big missions of our company. So it saddens us to see all these data breaches. I mean, I think at this point the general public is probably not surprised. It's almost like you're immune to it when you're the next 100 million people are affected by a data breach, but one of the things we're working on here is to try to come up with a solution for people, and just to have it enter the general consciousness. I don't think your experience is unfortunately uncommon. Just with respect to the Capital One breach in particular, I noticed that it was 100 million people that were affected. So it is it's one of these really large data breaches, and you might think, okay, well, I have my credit card. My credit card number was probably stolen, and so whatever, they'll charge some stuff on my card, but I won't be responsible for paying it, and I'll have to get a new card. Slight inconvenience, but it's actually it's quite a lot worse than that. At least that's what the reports are, and that. Capital One, in addition to having your name and credit card number, they also have your credit card application. And that is apparently where, the data breach occurred, was that the applications were accessed. So, think about all the information that's probably in your credit card application. It could be social security number, address, history, some personal history, and, those things that's, not a pleasant thing, because especially if your social security number is stolen, there's a whole bunch of nefarious activities that somebody can do with it. So hopefully, it doesn't affect you personally, but I'm sure, for many of the people, it will.
Yeah, not exactly how I wanted to end up on the dark web, but
Right.
it's almost like you said, being desensitized. It's almost like another mass shooting happened. It's like, oh, another data breach.
Yeah, yeah, and what's I think is maybe the most troubling part of it is, I was reading that, since they're a public company, they have to report what their, expected damage is going to be. And, I saw that their early estimation is like 100 to 150 million, in damage to the company, which, that sounds like a big number in the abstract. But when you think about it on a per person basis, that's like $1 per person. It's not like there's going to be some windfall available for people to recover whatever the true damage is that they suffered. And I think that's probably the most alarming aspect of these breaches is that there's very little recourse for people. Being a lawyer, I obviously focus on the legal side of it, but just practically speaking, your data's out there. There's no way to know, how far, like, to follow basically the transmission of it once it's, sort of released into the open. And it's also, from a legal aspect, it's difficult to prove if you do become damaged. That could be 5 years down the line for all you know. And it'll be hard to trace back to, let's say Capital One, but maybe your data is exposed from someone else and you don't even know about it, which makes it difficult to prove, like a case that, if you had to bring a lawsuit against Capital One or join a class, it's difficult to prove your particular damage in the future, which is why, I think that you see that these numbers, while they sound big, are not, they're certainly, if your data is actually stolen, you're certainly going to have a lot more than a couple $100 of inconvenience and damage. So, I saw a lot of people, the Equifax breach was certainly one of the more well-known in history. And it's a good one to, use as an example, just because it was a while ago. It was in 2017. And, we basically now seen the aftermath sort of flush itself out. But, I think they ended up spending, it was one of the largest data breaches in history, and it cost them 700 million, which again, each person is only going to get $100 or so, and many people are going to have a lot more damage. And then from the company side, if you look at the company today, Equifax shares are pretty much back to the price where they were when this whole thing happened. So yeah, they had some short-term damage, but it's troubling, and I think that's probably why we see these things continue to happen. Is there's not enough recourse for people, and there's not enough incentive from the company level to make sure that they don't happen.
Wow. Yeah, that is very troubling. Just the lack of accountability. Wow. That makes it seem so much. That's really the Wild West of what's going on right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, I really like AXEL's commitment to, privacy, protecting data. Do you think maybe in the future there will be a way to incorporate these important transactions and data that we use to conduct our online lives, like through AXEL?
I mean, that's what we're working on. That's our mission. I mean, it's not going to solve every problem. People are still going to need to, transmit their personal data for certain reasons. But, what AXEL is doing, and it really plays into, what a big focus is. First of all, as a company, it's never been AXEL. The best thing that you can do as a company, if you care about this, or if you're a consumer and you're looking for a company to do business with, is not give your data in the first place. And we really don't collect people's personal data, unlike some others. So, I think that's as a company, that's the best way to, ensure that there's not going to be data stolen, is to not have it in the first place. But, with the AXEL network, it has been designed specifically with, data privacy in mind. And we're hoping to be able to facilitate transactions on the web, using sort of using blockchain as a good thing, where it, will make some of the data immutable, but not personal data. And that's kind of the key to it, where, it won't be like using Amazon or something like that, where they're going to, have all this personal data just sitting on a server somewhere. If you use, the AXEL exchange to do a transaction, that won't happen. So, yeah, it's been an interesting ride, but with each of the data breaches that we see, we kind of our company mission is only like reinforced, and our resolve strengthened that much more to complete what it is we're doing, and hopefully promote it appropriately so that people will there'll be a lot of demand for a network like ours.
Yeah. Well, that brings up something to mind about. I've heard others say there needs to be more regulation. Some say that there should be less regulation. I'm curious your take where things might be headed, in particular the United States, just to keep it more relevant to our largest audience. Who are making the rules in regards to blockchain and crypto, and what do you think the future regulation where might it be going?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I think, let's talk about the two areas that, we've been talking about. First, data privacy is probably an area where there needs to be a lot more regulation. And, I was just, looking at this a few weeks ago, but there's not even a bill proposed in Congress to, sort of tackle the data privacy issue. And it's one of the major issues. I think there's a lot of frustration in this country that happens when, you have a lot of moneyed interests on one side of the, equation. But, this is not like, if you follow, the upcoming election at all, it's not a big issue. There's not a lot of focus on data privacy. And, I think that's unfortunate. Hopefully, as awareness increases, and hopefully that will happen, there will be such a demand. What we need to happen is for there to be such a demand where, action just has to be taken, regardless of what the interests are on the other side. But that is, not in the foreseeable future at this point in time, despite all these data breaches. Just focusing a little bit more on your question in the blockchain space. What we unfortunately have is, another place where we have no regulation, at least at all, on a national level for what is appropriate and not appropriate. But what we do have is another set of, other sets of rules that are being sort of adapted to fit the blockchain space, which is kind of the worst of all worlds, because a lot of focus is on the Securities Exchange Commission, where they're traditionally focused on securities. So the question then becomes, are crypto tokens securities, and are they even in the purview of this regulatory agency? And if so, how are they regulated? And what you basically have is the SEC, which is an unelected branch of government, just applying laws that were written, in the 1930s, to a situation that's going on today, and it's a lot. It causes a lot of confusion. At best, it's confusion, and they tend to, regulatory agencies generally tend to overly apply their laws. They're always broadening their powers. You don't see too often where there's a regulatory agency that says, "Oh, this is out of the scope of our." Out of our purview. So they mostly will apply the laws that are on the books as broadly as they can to increase their power. And that's exactly what's happening here. I could just speak from our own company experience, with our IEO, even though we're a U.S. company, we didn't even allow through Probit U.S. people to participate, which, it's a major lost opportunity. The regulatory environment is just too uncertain for us. Even though we think we'd be on the right side of the equation, we certainly do not want to be a target of an enforcement action. So until there's a bit more certainty, it's just too risky for companies like ours that are trying to do the right thing to participate. And that's it's the worst for everybody, because then the only people that participate in the U.S. are, maybe nefarious actors or other companies that are just, maybe are willing to take more risk for a variety of reasons. But it prevents the people of the U.S. from participating in, maybe the good projects. At least that's our viewpoint. Now, there is some legislation that's been proposed. The Token Taxonomy Act is a big one, which would basically take most of it out of the realm of the SEC and define most tokens, including ours, as not securities, which, if something like that passed, it would be a game changer. But there's still, there's a lot of bills are introduced in Congress that never become law. So, we're hoping that something like this will happen eventually, but it is frustrating that there's this is just another area where there's just not been a ton of progress to date.
Yeah, I imagine there's probably no blockchain lobby like at all.
Not enough of one. I mean,
yeah.
What will hopefully happen is one thing that legislators and executives love to tout is job creation. And that's where you might see some pressure here, because right now, companies like ours in the U.S. are few and far between. But if you actually did have more certainty and regulation, I think, you'd see, because there's a lot of talent here in this country. And I think you'd see more business ventures spring up overnight, and there would be a lot of job creation. And I do think that's what, you've seen states take action. And I think that's why, they want to be, it's generally states that want to attract business to their state. But unfortunately, the way that the laws work in the U.S. is, if the federal government legislates in an area or acts in an area like, SEC enforcement, just having a state law that allows something is not going to, prevent the federal government or its agencies from enforcement. So it's great to see that states are, at least some states are moving in the right direction, just because, that shows that there's an appetite to do that. But, in general, it's one small step on out of many steps that need to occur. But yeah, I think job creation is probably, if I could think of the area that would push this forward, that could be it. And hopefully, the right people will champion that in the future.
Yeah. And I know that, I think Nevada has very friendly blockchain laws. I don't know if I'm just imagining that, or I thought that was the case.
Yeah, there were several pieces of legislation that were just passed the Nevada legislature and then signed into law just in 2019. We're actually incorporated in Wyoming, which is another very friendly blockchain state. So, again, there's a few states that have some friendly legislation, and it's great to see. We definitely applaud the states of Nevada and Wyoming and the others that have taken these steps. But, even with that, again, it doesn't prevent the SEC from doing what they think they want to do. So it's great to see, and it's a good positive step. And it shows that there would be support if these things were actually, brought up to votes and people actually focused on them in the future. But it's, we're not there yet.
Yeah. Something else that kind of seems missing from the picture are patents. And I'm curious if you know much about patents in the blockchain space, and are we seeing any of them, or is it still relatively too new to see that?
Yeah, that's an area that I've actually written about. And obviously, my practice background is in patents. So it's something that is, of great interest to me. And it's something I care about pretty deeply. First of all, we as a company are applying for patents on what, we have 4 blockchain patent applications. Unlike maybe some other projects, since we're a little bit more long-standing, we've actually been granted 11 patents already, and we have another 15 or so applications pending around the world on our, some of it's on our legacy technology and some of it's on our blockchain. But I think, what you see in the blockchain space, and it saddens me to read a little bit, is that there is like a bit of pushback to patents. and I think that it's a bit unfortunate because it's not going, if companies like ours don't file patent applications, it doesn't mean that, there won't be patent applications. What it means is that we're going to be ceding the blockchain space to the biggest players. I saw the other day, Bank of America, I think it was, they just publicized their, they've got dozens of blockchain patent applications on file. And I'm sure, I've read some other companies like Walmart and other bigger players, they're the ones who are active in the space because they recognize, the value of having patents. And it will be very unfortunate if they're the only players in the space. And unfortunately, if the small companies like ours aren't, engaged in, filing patent applications and, inventing new things, which is even more important, then we're going to end up ceding the space to the bigger players. And we've kind of seen that happen to the internet, to be honest with you, where you've got 5 or 6 huge companies that control everything, and it's hard for others to break through in the space. So people might think, the perception, I think, out there might be in some cases that, well, patents are bad because they're just going to prevent, they're going to take a monopoly in the space. But that's not the case at all. I think patents are really the only way for a smaller company like ours to protect, to make sure we can exist. Let's say we're successful and our idea starts to become adopted. Well, what prevents a company like, Google or something from writing software to do the same thing that we're doing? They have teams of dozens and dozens of people, more manpower than we could ever hope to muster. And, the only thing that will help us survive in the space, if that happens, is, our intellectual property. So I think it's something I've written about, as I mentioned. I would encourage any good project should be looking into, protecting their ideas because, first of all, it gives something back to society because you are writing a very complete disclosure, which becomes public. And that's kind of the whole point, is that, you disclose your idea to the public in a complete manner, and then other people can build on that. But at the same time, it also, sort of preserves the space for everyone rather than just, letting the guy with the biggest marketing, a cauldron of cash to take over.
That's really important and a kind of a different perspective. I mean, we've had people on the show before kind of proclaiming how everything should be, well, not everything, but open source so that other people can work on it. But when you bring up the fact that other larger corporations can just take that and make it their own, and then it's effectively locked up, that's something I didn't really think about. My other question is international theft. Say a Chinese company were to steal, say maybe something that AXEL wrote. Would an American patent protect you guys internationally, or does that only apply for American companies?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. And, I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but just generally, patents are country specific. So U.S. patents only prevent, you can only enforce them against people's activities and sales in the U.S. So, the answer to your question is generally no, but usually, if there's a big company, a big player out there, they're probably going to be, selling or making their services available to the U.S. So and that's usually a pretty sizable portion of their market. So U.S. patents do still have value, even if it's a non-U.S. company. But, at the same time, we're pursuing patent applications in China and the European Union as well, because, like you said, it's a global world out there. And, if we don't pursue the same protection in China, well, that could be problematic for us. So yeah, I think, patents are country specific, and that's why we're applying for them around the world. But, a U.S. patent does have a lot of power just because it's such a desirable market to be in too.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for that. This has been a really good talk so far. I wanted to ask you, how can listeners get involved with AXEL, even if they are in the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, well, the first thing is right now, anyone can register for an AXEL account. Our software, our sharing software and unification software, which is really one of the cooler things that we have. If you're somebody like me, and before I was aware of AXEL, I had files on my computer at home and other stuff on my phone. And what our software does is it unifies all that. And importantly, just dovetailing into our earlier conversation, without giving a third party any access to any of that. So that, one way to get involved is to, get our legacy software. But even cooler is our IPFS network is also already running. And, anyone can register for an account. And when you do, you get, we give a sort of a small number of AXEL tokens because, our project and our system is already working, where you do need tokens to use the system. So we give sort of a small number of tokens so anyone can try it. What we give actually, it can last for like a couple of thousand shares, I think, and a couple of thousand data stores. So it's possible to try it out. And, I think in the future, we're going to have more and more availability in the US. It's more just, at least at the initial stage, the token availability and masternode availability just stemming from that is a little bit limited, but we hope to have more and more as the system, continues to grow, more and more availability to the US.
Yeah, that's great. And I love the term interplanetary file sharing system. It makes me think of, is this going to go intergalactic soon?
Well, as soon as we get some computers up on Mars, I'm sure we'll be looking to post some data there. So, but yeah, the more it is kind of a really neat file system, and it's really much in line with our whole corporate mission, which is that there shouldn't be, the best way to stop a Capital One or an Equifax is that there isn't one computer sitting there with 100 million social security numbers. So, IPFS is a great way to, sort of minimize that risk.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you guys are working on that. And it's crazy to me that it's taken this long to get there. And we still have a lot of work to do, but it's very refreshing to have this conversation with you, Dave. Is there anything you'd like to leave our audience with?
Yeah, just come and interact with us. We're on Discord, we're on Telegram, and we always have people answering questions, even if it's legal stuff, and people want to get in touch with me. My email is dave.kaplan@axel.org, dave.kaplan@axel.org. And yeah, please email me. Please hit us up on Telegram, Discord. We love to engage with the community, and I would love to, hear from any listener that wants to reach out. And please please get out there and try our products too, and let us know what your experience is like.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time, Dave. It's been really good talking to you. I hope we can reconnect in the future, maybe within the next 6 months, even hopefully, just to see how things are going. So.
Yeah, that would be great. Hopefully we can have some positive movement on some of these legislative initiatives that we've been discussing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thanks again. I'll let you go, and have a good day.
Thanks for having me on. Bye now.
My pleasure. Bye.
This episode of The Blockchain Show is brought to you by AXEL, IPFS. AXEL is committed to data privacy and protection. For more information about AXEL, visit www.axel.network/IPFS.